Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for showing up for this live stream. I am Dr. Sides. In case if you have never, if this is your first time on SideStream Pro's channel, and I have been having fun helping a lot of our Texas young All-State and All-Region hopefuls to prepare for the All-Region and All-State auditions for quite a while already. So thank you again for attending. This is, I know, a week before the All-Region auditions, at least in the regions that are next to me. We have Region 28 and Region 15. And so knowing that this is our last Saturday before that, I thought I would just open this up to all of you. And before we start, big thanks to all who voted on the poll that was posted on our channel. And so the first poll that I posted had asked which Texas All-State etudes are hard, etude is harder, and 57% voted for Fiorillo 32 and 33% for Kreutzer 31. We also had 8% for the answer that said both equally hard. And then finally, we had 2% out of 60 votes that they're both super easy. Well, I'm really happy for you. If both of the etudes are easy for you, that means you are an amazingly accomplished violinist. So great job, congratulations. Oh, and here I see Добрый день. This is hello in Russian. And thank you so much. Спасибо за то, что вы пришли. Thank you so much for showing up. So the next poll that I took had 19 votes so far, and this particular poll was specifically about Kreutzer 32, since I basically launched it in preparation for this live stream to know how I could help you guys better during this session. So just, I want you to treat it as an open and free workshop. I hope you have your instruments with you, and I'm just going to start working on certain passages according to the answers that I got in the poll. So definitely we're going to mostly concentrate on Kreutzer 32, but feel free to post questions as we're working about any other Kreutzer 31 etude or any other questions you might have about All-State, All-Region auditions, or just audition process in general, or any specific techniques that come up during this time. So our second poll that was posted, only three. Hi Genichiro, thank you so much for attending. Great to have you. And I'm glad this time we actually figured out how to start the live stream. So I'm sorry last time it didn't work. Oh yeah, go ahead. We have a question. Go ahead. What's your question? And while nice to meet you too. So while he's typing, I will be just talking about the poll. So the poll about 32, Fiorillo 32, actually states that most of you voted that the hardest part about techniques in this etude, again, this is the majority. I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but the majority voted left hand double stop technique. That's at the top, so 47%. Then the next difficulty was 26% voted for double stop bow arm technique. So obviously, as far as, yes, I know, I'm sorry. And because we had to actually start, I know some of our listeners, they attended our last, they wanted to attend the last live stream, but we ended up having to start a separate one because we couldn't figure out how to get this one started. So now, thanks to my wonderful, computer proficient son who showed me how to start the actual live stream that we already posted, we can actually do it here. And so I hope more of you can join us. So yeah, so the first thing we're going to discuss is double stop left hand technique. Then we're going to go to double stop arm technique. And then if we have time left, we have the next one is fast passage technique, actually bow arm control. And the last one was fast passage technique intonation. So again, this is just only this poll was posted 3 days ago, and 19 people actually voted to answer. So please feel free to ask anything else that you'd like to work on. But since we do have to kind of keep going until I get any more specific questions for you, I would like to work with you on the difficulty that seems to be number one for a lot of you is double stops left hand technique in Kreutzer. So that's in Fiorulo 32. So here's my A. Right, so that you can tune. This is actually a great exercise if you would like to play along, because when it has anything that has to do with intonation, your number one judge is your ears, right? So it always helps if you can play along with someone. I'm not saying I have the perfect intonation, but I did practice it a lot, and I think I'm more or less within the appropriate limits that would be okay for whatever audition you're playing. So it might just be a little bit more fun to practice along. So number one, if you look at the very first measure of Kreutzer, my bad, of Fiorulo 32, we have, I think the hardest note to nail in tune is actually the second note in the bottom voice, which is G. What I find that, and it happened to me too when I started working on this etude, I tended to underestimate how far this G is from E flat. So when I am on D string, it's a different feel than when I am actually playing a fifth. It seems to, for some reason, maybe because the angle of my arm has to adjust a little bit this way rather than being completely over the D string. I think for that reason, the distance actually feels a little farther. So this is what I'd like to work first. But let me see, I think we have a comment. So Genichiro Matsuo, when you audition the excerpt, what does the judge look for? Oh, wow, that's a fabulous question. So let's just answer it real quick. So what do the judges look for? Actually, I wanted to let you know, I just found out that I will be judging not all state, but all region auditions for both of the regions that are close to us, 15 and 28. And, for all state, I can tell you what I heard, that for Texas all state auditions, speed is very important. So obviously, things like having a good intonation, having good sound, clean sound, these are very important. But for all state, the speed also is very, very important, because you're given only a certain limit of time that you can use to record each excerpt. So if you exceed that limit, if your tempo is too slow, even if you're playing it perfectly, but you exceed the limit of the recording, from what I understand, you're automatically cut. So great question. So to answer your question, if you're speaking of all state auditions, then all the normal things like intonation, quality of sound, proper notes, not missing any accidentals, executing your stylistic features as trills according to the style of the etude and so forth. But all of that needs to be done for all state within those speed limits that the all state that TMAA sets for the etudes. For the reason that I stated is because they will cut, the recording will stop after a certain time, and then they'll consider you playing too slowly. Now, the same goes for all state orchestra excerpts. That the all state orchestra excerpts came out, and they're not too bad this year, I feel. But again, it's not enough to just execute them very well. For all state, if you want to qualify, you do need to make sure, practice with the metronome and make sure that you are within the limits of the speed that is set by TMAA. So I hope that helps. Now, if we're talking all region, that's a little different. Now, every region is different. So I would say, number one, make sure and talk to either to your private teacher or your orchestra director who is in that region, who is teaching with you. Obviously, they probably will be from that region. So they would know very, very well of the region requirements, specific region requirements. But as far as myself, since I do communicate a lot with the educators from the region 15 and 28, and like I said, this year I'll actually be judging the region 15 and 28. I know that for me personally, the most important thing for region auditions is the quality of your performance. So if it comes to whether you are going to play as fast as TMA requirement, but you might lose some of the quality, I think my recommendation would be take it a little slower, but at the tempo where you can actually show all the quality of your performance. And of course, with these etudes, guys, don't get too complicated. Don't make it too complicated, actually, for both All State and All Region. My daughter, Esther, as you know, she won audition for fellowship for the Minnesota Orchestra, and she's working on auditioning for other professional orchestras. And she had the privilege, actually, of sitting in the professional orchestra committee auditions, where she got to actually listen to professional orchestra players playing auditions. She didn't necessarily get to vote, but she got, and she realized, she said, the more you simplify for the auditions, the better, especially for these auditions. So just think, can you play all of the notes in tune? Then do that. Can you play all the correct bowings? Do that. Can you play all the correct articulations? Do that. Can you play all the correct dynamics? Do that. And do that in the tempo as close to required tempo as you can, but don't sacrifice the quality for the speed. I hope that helps. So, well, yeah, perfect. I hear what you're saying. Yes, I don't like the word perfect. How about optimal performance? Think of what is the most optimal performance for you and aim for that. Right? So because, perfect, I feel like for me, the word perfect is very triggering. So if I think of playing perfectly, I probably will mess up more than I normally would, right? So if for you the word perfect works positively, yes. I prefer thinking of the words beautiful, optimal, right? Maybe more of like actionable things, like think of smooth in the bow, or relaxed in the left hand, things like that your mind can actually do something with during performance, rather than the word perfect doesn't give you a lot of information. Now I'm talking about what I'm thinking during performance, right? So yes, I see what you mean, but I try to stay away from the word perfect, because I personally don't think I could ever play anything perfectly, because music is so complex. If I think, yeah, I nailed all the intonation, all the articulation, everything perfectly, but there's so much more to that. Did I do exactly the phrasing I wanted? Did I do the type of sound I wanted to do? Was I exactly in the right part of the bow that I want? I don't think personally I could ever say that I played something perfectly, but I am happy with a lot of my performances, thinking from the point that it was really optimal for my level. It was always, I felt like I brought everything I could, and sometimes even better, because I was in the right state of mind, or that it was just beautiful and it was very organic with what the composer was putting in the music, right? So yeah, so that's just my approach, but I totally agree with what you mean. Yes. But think of it in a more simple way. Even if we're thinking perfect, like, again, simplify it, because perfect means so much. But if you look at the paper, so if we just look right here, right? I don't know if you can see this. Just think of what you see in the notes. And sometimes, like I tell you, this happened to me. I would be on stage and I would start panicking. My mind would just go, rattling off and thinking of, oh, I'm going to mess up. Especially in chamber music, when you can make a wrong entrance and mess everything up for everybody else. So, and I remember what I did once it just happened. What happened, I just said, well, I'm just going to play the next note. If you think the beginning of Fiorillo, you have E flat. Can you play an E flat really well? We all can play E flat very well. Can we play a B flat very well? That was pretty perfect for me. I mean, it was a perfect B flat, right? So can I put them together? Yep. Now, next note is G. Can I play a G? Definitely. Can I play another E flat? Yes. So a lot of times, this is what I would do. I'll just literally think, I can play the next note. And you guys, if you are seriously working on your region rep, I mean, I'm sure if you take each note separately from everything else, I know that you can totally nail each and every note in this, in each of these caprices, right? Or etudes. So if you, can you think like that? I mean, all I have to do, especially in the slower selections, such as Fiorillo, you know, you can, if you can kind of zoom into each next note without worrying about the big picture, because by now I'm sure you know it, right? So this is, so if we're thinking perfect, I mean, yeah, I think that's a pretty perfect E flat. I mean, it's hard to mess up a single note, right? At our level, at the level that you guys are playing, that we're working on. So yeah, great. I know, panic, but that's what, like, that's what I do. You know, when my mind keeps, I think we're trying to think of too many things at once, and that breeds distress to our faculties. And you have to just trust your body. I mean, your muscle memory is probably there. And so if you literally, sometimes I do this to my students, I would cover up everything and just leave these two notes and say, can you play that? And of course they played that. Oh, okay. So you don't have a Fiorillo. All right. But let's do, since a lot of people voted for Fiorillo, let me show a couple of ways I practice. That's a very simple way to practice intonation. So for the beginning, like I said, first have a strategy of nailing this fifth. So for me, this is what makes the fifths in tune or out of tune. It's not really so much this way as adjusting this angle a little bit, but also how much flesh do you have on which string. So if, for example, if I put most of the flesh of my finger on A string, you see what happens? Now A string is higher. A string note is higher than the D string note. Now if I do it the other way and put most of the flesh of my finger on D string, see, now it's the other way, right? So now the D string note is too sharp and the A string note is too flat. So these two things, I would experiment with you, and and I would find the optimal angle here and just make sure you tune your strings first, and then try to make a note of which note usually is out of tune. Most of the time you'll have a certain note. It will be the same note and the same way out of tune, right? So for example, and then take a note and then practice doing a little bit of the opposite. So if usually your top note is flat, then that means move a little bit more of a flesh of your finger to the top note and adjust, right? And if it works, I would just just do that several times in a row. Now, so that's, have a strategy for your beginning for the intonation. Another thing that is tricky about this etude, that after, sometimes we're so concerned about the fifth. Hey, thank you, brave young lion. Oh, good. Thank you for coming in. So I'm sure we'll have some fun tips for everyone, beginners and advanced. So now our next big task, once we figure out our strategy for a fifth that's in tune, we do have to all of a sudden play this note that now seems much farther. Remember how I said at the beginning that we had to play a fifth, we have to move the elbow a little bit more that way rather than your regular adjustment on the D string, right? And so this is what the next exercise I'm going to give you is all about. It's very simple, and it's actually a fabulous warm-up for this etude. So as you are getting ready to go, if your region cut, most of our region cuts, they do have this beginning. So you just break it up. So instead of playing, what you're going to do, you're going to play notes separately. See what I did? So I basically took E, E flat, B flat, G, B flat, E flat, B flat, and then I also added F, which is right in the middle between E. Yeah? So you want to try it. If you have your violin, go ahead and try it with me. So we're basically using the same exact notes, that those 3 notes, right? So our goal is to nail the 3 first notes, E flat and B flat, right? And G. That's just E flat major triad. That's super easy, right? So and now we're gonna also add F. And again. Right? So this is, I would say, it's very important to warm up before you play something like Fiorillo, because the double stops, they tend to take a toll on our physique more than single stop passages, right? And so for that reason, you really want to be mindful of your muscles, and you want to be very, very smart when, let me see, I'm trying to follow. Yeah, so, and you want to be very, very smart with how you're practicing your double stops, because you can't practice them 20 hours a day like you maybe could the single stop notes, right? So for that, really warm up first, but don't be tired, and then really try to anticipate. If there's a certain note you're always playing out of tune, anticipate that and fix it and try to play it right. So the more times you play it correctly, the sooner it will change and you'll have the correct intonation. So now, so suppose you are warming up like this. You could also, to help your bow arm to warm up, you could also do this. Do it for a longer bow. Nice warm up. You can also do it with vibrato. Let's try it. Because one of the things that makes this sound really good, make this etude sound really good, is actually adding vibrato, because it is a slow double stop etude. So if you don't have any vibrato, it becomes really, really difficult to make it pretty. So if you warmed up without vibrato and you feel good about your intonation, one of the tips, you make sure that your G is always hitting the right, is tuned to your open G. So now let's try the same thing with vibrato. So you see, you're incorporating vibrato. Now, let's see what other notes we can incorporate. Because we have, do we ever need an A flat? No, so we don't have to worry about it. You see, on D string, I don't even think we ever get an A flat. So it's very, very simple. So now that we did that, how about if you warmed up and you feel good staggering the strings and breaking your double stops. How about we're gonna do the same pattern, but now we're gonna hold both strings like this. Let's do it the first time with no vibrato at all. One more time. Try to hit the G exactly right. If you got it and if you felt that this was good, all right. So if you felt that, yeah, I see a request for a measure 7. We'll do just in a second. Thank you so much. That's from Matt Potter. Great. So now that we've done it without the vibrato, you could go ahead and add a little vibrato. All right. And so I would really work on these warm-ups. I think if you do that, it will really improve the beginning of your fiorello and you'll feel much more comfortable. So we have a request from Matt Potter, tips on measure 7 with the 8th note double stop going up. It never sounds clean for me. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Am I counting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so is that oh, 8. Okay, thank you. Oh, yes. So actually, and we do have A flat there. Thank you so much. So this is the perfect example. Here, there are a few things that do make it very awkward. I'm so glad you brought it up. For me, it was one of the most awkward parts because it is down bow, but it has a crescendo. And then your arm keeps twisting more and more as you're going up. So how to do all of that? Number one, what I would do, I would eliminate, not worry about crescendo. And first, just to see if you could even out all of the double stops, right? So I would do this warm up as I did on the beginning. I would do maybe the same warm up practice like this. I will break between the bottom and the top voice. Yes. So I would start like this. If you're practicing on this part, I would do this little warm up and watch my intonation. Now, the next thing I would do, I would add a little vibrato to it. Right? The reason it's good to have vibrato here because it'll try to relax and just let your hand breathe, even if it's not vibrating all the time, right? Again, because this etude, you probably want to vibrate just a little bit if you want it to sound good, just a little bit. Now you have to be very careful and find the right notes to vibrate, and you don't have to vibrate everything, but a lot of times that will make it sound much better. So next, let's go to the next level. Now we're going to elevate this warm up and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to hold both voices, but we're going to again go kind of a scale up and down and then a little faster, right tempo. And right down. Now let's use the same tempo, but the whole bow for the passage going up and down. let's add a little crescendo. No vibrato yet. Now let's add a little vibrato, just a little, like literally just relax right here. Just let your hand do whatever it wants. Right? So number one, this is what I would do. I would work these warm-ups into my routine separately from the etudes, separately, not as you're working on the excerpt. Just pretend it's a completely different exercise, like it's a different Kreutzer etude, or maybe it's a flesh scale, or like some scale workbook, Schradig book that is completely different. So you don't get mentally attached, you know, because usually if it's a part of an excerpt and we always tend to play it a certain way, for your brain, it's hard to think of something different. So I would do that. So now let's go back to practical things. If I promise, if you can play these warm-ups and make them comfortable, make them sound really good the way you want to, then you will know exactly what to do with this particular part, with this measure. Now, I know for me, so let's go from yeah, so I wanted to make sure to get into it. So number one, and I would take your pencil right now, if you have it with you, if you have your music, I assume you do, and that's Matt Potter, right? So because you were counting the measures, take your pencil, and do you see at the beginning of that measure, on this note, there's a hairpin that's starting, right? I would scratch that hairpin out and move it to under maybe F. Because one of the things that I do, and then I would put double, triple, quadruple P under the very first note of that measure. And maybe even the second note. So one of the reasons that it might sound a little bit, maybe it chokes, you choke the sound on that, on that passage because it's quite long. And you might be starting your crescendo too soon. So by the time you get to the A flat, you're topped out on your sound, and then it could be sound forced. So I think one of the best remedies for this, to make it easier, to make your sound more flowing, to make the quality of the sound, and also to relax yourself, is I would scratch out that hairpin and start it on F, and before D and E, and before that I'll put triple P's. Now the reason I do that for myself, because yes, mentally we all know that this means gradual crescendo, but the problem is, so that means at the beginning of that hairpin at the bottom, we should still stay piano for a while. But the problem is our eyes, the minute they see it, our hands want to do a crescendo. So I would highly recommend, I would practice like that. I would start very light and save my bow in the first two notes, because they're also the easiest, right? So the first two or three notes, you're not involving your third or fourth finger that are the weakest, and also your hand is not quite as twisted. So why not save bow and wait and relax and just play it really nice and gentle. You see, and then you can make this really huge gesture. So with the same amount of sound, but by postponing your crescendo and using slower bow speed at the beginning and then much faster bow speed at the end, you can make a very, very big impression, right, with this. So let me demonstrate. So I'm going to get into this again. So from the measure 6, so suppose I'm playing. Of course, I don't know if you can hear dynamics over the YouTube. I'm sorry, I have no idea. But I'm trying. So let's see. So this makes a pretty nice gesture. Now, if I got into it too loud, see what happens. It's very hard to make it pretty. Oh, great. So glad it's helping. Fabulous. And you see, it's such a simple thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. So just make sure. So Matt Potter is writing in the comments that is really helping. 2 notes soft. Yeah. So you were working too hard at the beginning. You're so welcome. Guys, I'm so happy. This is why I do this, because as a violinist myself, you have no idea how many hours I beat my head against the wall, figuratively speaking, to figure out these simple things. So it makes me so happy to see that they're working for you. Yes, great. So I'm so glad. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this same little measure A, right? Since it came up. I want you to be aware of what's going on with your left hand, because on top of building up this scale, obviously, and trying to be in tune, remember I mentioned that the first 3 notes, you have an open string on the bottom, then first finger, then 2. So you have to realize the first and the second, it's just so unfair. I mean, life of a violinist is unfair, right? Because look at this. Here's my left hand. Yeah? And the fingers that are the longest and the strongest, guess what? They're also the closest to the fingerboard. So when it comes to the weakest and shortest, and look at my pinkies are not just short, they're crooked. I mean, they're horrible. So they are actually the farthest away from the fingerboard. So with that said, look at this. So not only you might not realize what your body is doing for you, but I want you to appreciate how much your body is doing for you. So once you get to G and A, you're also having to twist much more, because now you're in that more close position, right? So all of that together, just imagine, that also creates stress for your bow arm. Believe it or not, our hands like to work together. So when you are doing something more strenuous here, this hand picks up on it. And that's why I'm saying, if you can just simplify as much as you can in the bow arm at the beginning where things are easy, and then just let yourself roll at the end when things get harder, you will have such a better sound in this measure. So I'm very, very happy to hear that. So here are some more, let's see. So we talked a little bit about, okay. Okay, 5th and 6th line. So we're talking 32, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, those are my favorite. So here, Matt. So Matt Potter is asking how to make those lines more beautiful. And I'm with you. They're so gorgeous. Very, very simple. Make sure you're using vibrato. And this is the trick that I use all the time on double stops. Now, thankfully, let me see. So here, I think this, if I counted correctly, we're talking. Right? Those are so gorgeous. This sounds like aria. You know Bach? Right? It has a sentiment of that. I don't know if you've seen one of my tutorials, but I think the very first one I did on this, I did put some links to Bach movements that are very much using this technique. I'm so glad. So here's my trick. Now, I don't want you to do what I just did. The best part about music, you are the artist. So don't forget, the technique is there only to give you pains, like for an artist, visual artist, right? Suppose you're a visual artist and you bought the most beautiful, I don't know anything about the visual arts, but suppose, I'm just making things up. The most expensive, whatever, what is that called? the material that you use to paint on. Just the English word escapes me. Holst is the Russian word. I can't think of English word right now. Canvas. There you go. So you got the most expensive, the best quality canvas. You did it yourself. You put it on the frame yourself. You got like the most expensive, best frame in the world. You tighten that canvas on that frame just the way you like it. You invested in like $1 million paints that are like the best paints, the best everything. You went to the best teachers in the world. And so once you have all these tools, you sit down and said, well, now I've accomplished everything. Thank you and good night. And people will be like, wait a minute, what do you mean? Now it's the time to paint your amazing painting. So I think with us, a lot of times this is what happens. So we work so hard on the technique because violin is hard. And then we forget that technique is wonderful, but that's only a tool. This is only the smallest part of the most gratifying thing that we're going to do, because the most gratifying thing that we're going to do with this technique is create the art. So think of all of these techniques that you're learning in your scales and your etudes and everyday performing or practicing is like you're like a painter who is acquiring these most amazing skills, brush skills, tools, canvas, paints, palette, But then don't forget that all of that, once you have all of that, it all only makes sense if you paint your masterpiece with it. So going to this spot, Matt, I'm so glad you asked about this because this is my most favorite spot and it is beautiful. All you have to do is play it without the bottom voice and see how would you like to phrase it, right? So just imagine that this is a duet, that someone else is playing the bottom voice and you only in charge of the top voice and you can do whatever you wish. Now just start it. And you don't even have to do like the positions. You could do in the first position and just think of what singing is great. I'm not a good singer, but when I don't know how to phrase things, I sing and my voice usually tells me. So two things. Think of how would you play it if you were the soloist and you were accompanied by an orchestra? And if you didn't have to worry about this horrible shift here. I mean, go over the top. Make it super extra for yourself. Just do it so that you get goosebumps. It's a really beautiful piece. I think this piece actually would make a fabulous encore. It doesn't even sound like an etude to me. But so this is and actually, what you could do, you could also record yourself. When you feel like you really got this beautiful phrasing, play and record yourself. You could either do a video recording would be helpful because that will help you to see what your bow distribution is doing, right? What your bow is doing, but even voice message, or even just remember how it felt. And so after that, think, okay, where did I vibrate? Where did I make a crescendo? Where did I maybe taper the sound? Where did I take a breath, right? Where did I put a little pause to how do I phrase everything when I didn't have to worry about double stops and all these uncomfortable things in the left and the bow arm? And so after that, I promise you, it will be very clear to you of what you need to do when you're adding the double stops. And especially since if you already know how to play those double stops, it will be helpful because it'll finally take your focus away from the left hand and worrying about all the technique into listening to the pretty part of the music. And I promise you, it will be very clear to you what to do to play it beautifully. And I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you so much. Guys, this is so much fun. I think this is the most action I've ever seen in our live. So please pitch in. Please ask any questions. I know it's themed for All State Etudes. I know it's themed for, I'm working mostly on Fiorillo, but please feel free to pitch in with any comments, any questions. I'd be very happy to answer. So yeah, I'm glad. So, and this is actually a great advice in general for any music, any solo violin, especially when you play solo violin pieces that have this technique where you have double stops to provide accompaniment and harmony for yourself. It becomes very difficult to phrase because our focus is very split. So this is my go-to tool to work. For example, this beautiful Largo from Solo Bach. Oops. The beginning is very difficult to phrase, but if you drop the double stops and harmonies, and if you just imagine that your solo is just playing a beautiful melody, you see, immediately you will figure out what you need to do phrase-wise, because you will be uninhibited by all of this extra prep that you have to do to hit the double stops. So basically, I use that all the time in so many performances, preps for performances, and so much of the solo violin rep. I love actually playing solo violin rep. They're beautiful. It's unfortunately, it's not that easy to come across really good solo violin rep. It's mostly, your staples, Bach, Isai, Paganini, but, because it takes not just extra from a violinist, it also takes extra from the composer. You have to be very acquainted with the violin. You have to be very talented to write good music for violin solo. Okay. Oh, great question from Matt Potter again. I always play well during practice, but during audition time, I get really nervous and start thinking about all the ways I could mess up. What do you think about when playing in front of many people? Oh my goodness. Welcome to the club. We've all been there. And thank you for bringing it up, because this is a very important. So my daughter, just recently we talked about this, and she told me that her fabulous teacher, who teaches at Manhattan School of Music, where she studied, her name is Julia Lichten. She's a cello professor at Manhattan School of Music in New York. And Esther was once talking to her about this little voice that starts telling you things right when you're about to go to perform, especially while you're performing. And so Julia told her this. I think it's an ingenious trick. She said, you know what? I understand. So basically, this is technically, that voice is a good thing. We learn to listen to that voice when we start learning how to practice well, right? So there are two mindsets that you need to practice. The first one of them, both are important. One of them is practice mindset, and what you have to realize, although practice mindset is extremely important, but it's very different from your performance mindset. So performance mindset is very different. It's like a different part. Some people say it's more right brain than left brain or whatever. I'm not an expert, but I know, that word in the zone, when you feel that everything is working out. That's what I know. That's my way of thinking. Yes, I'm in the performance mindset. And in that time, when I'm in the zone, that little voice tends to stop nagging me, right? So number one, so what Julia told Esther, number one, you have to think of this voice as a positive thing, because it's your brain trying to remind you of things so that you do better, right? So number one, see it as a positive person. I know, it's role playing trick. So imagine that this is just maybe yourself who wants you to do the best possible, and that's why it's trying to warn you of all the things that could go wrong. So what you do, she said, you close your eyes, you think of that voice, and you say, dear voice in my head, I know it's silly. Thank you so much for telling me these things. I know they're very useful, and I know that you mean you do this to protect me and to help me to have the best performance of my life. And I thank you that you're always there during my practice to help me to prepare for this. But I want to ask you today, your services are not needed anymore. You can take a day off and enjoy your day off. And then when I go back to practicing, I will see you again. And so I know it's silly, but it's sort of, and of course, you want to just kind of really make it very real to yourself, right? To be somewhere where it's quiet, where you can really role play and imagine. It's just a game, right? But so Esther was saying that she, at that point, she was like freaking out and nervous because she just learned this very difficult concerto and she had to play it in the master class in front of everyone. And she said she did just that, and she said it really worked, and she played her best. So try that trick. So basically, what you have to, first of all, don't freak out that it's something negative. Think of it as your brain, your mind, your body is trying to help you, because that's the only way your body knows. That's how it tells you. When you practice, something goes wrong, it tells you, you know, you need to stop and fix it. But this is one of the tricks. If you really personify that voice and really think of it, imagine it as a person, and just thank, instead of being negative, you know, and defensive, think positively and thank this imaginary person for helping you practice, and just tell them, and today you can just take a break and have a vacation because your services are not needed, right? So I hope this helps. I know it's a silly example. For me also, awesome. Let me know how it works. Sancan, great. Oh, great to have you here. Oh, I missed you. I haven't heard from you in a while. Yes. So that's one way. And basically every other trick that worked for me, it's the same. One time, I tell you, it's so funny, it's almost embarrassing. I was waiting to perform. I was performing a solo with an orchestra, and it was quite a difficult piece. And I was fine. I was ready, but you know, I started getting those weird things, just like Matt mentioned. You know, my brain just started off, like rolling with all these, think of all the negative things that could happen. And all of a sudden, I don't know where it came from, but I just saw this in my mind. I was watching the series with this very famous person starring in it, you know, very, very famous, very, like, I won't say who it was because, you know, I don't want to like chase rabbits or anything. And all of a sudden, I don't know what got into me. In my mind, I just jumped into that person's shoes. And I felt like, what if I was in that person's shoes, meaning, you know, like metaphorically, like if I were, so basically the thing was like, I was feeling like I would if I were that person. And I can't imagine, I completely felt different because I sort of assumed, you know, I guess we assume certain things about people who appear to be very confident and who are constantly in front of the camera or on stage. And we kind of assume from their demeanor that they're not scared of it, and they never make mistakes and things like that. So I kind of, in my mind, and I have no idea where it came from, I promise you, it was just like, I don't know what it was. And in my mind, I kind of jumped in that person's shoes, and I imagined that person being on stage right where I'm supposed to be right now. And so I am that person playing and not me. And oh my goodness, I had so much fun. I totally went like what I think is probably my right brain, where you know, the voice wasn't there, and I was just enjoying myself, and I felt super confident, at least at the beginning. You know, after the first 5 minutes, it was like, but then, you know, by then you're already on the roll. And so I highly recommend that. It's also kind of a role playing. I think role playing is such a good trick because again, I think it's more sort of like a right brain, I guess, than left brain. So logically, it's very hard to convince your mind to do something differently. But when you do a role playing, it's almost like you're all of a sudden you're just in a completely different environment, and your brain just doesn't know how to do. Maybe it's not used to turning that strain of thought in that environment, and so it's kind of shocks a little bit and doesn't know what to do. And so that's the trick for me. I totally try to make it into a game rather than explain it to myself. And I have to say, each new trick I learn works well, and then sometimes it stops working as well. So then I try to think of a new trick. But really, role playing to me is the best way to beat that brain, you know, that particular strain of thought that it's just so habitual, it's hard to break it, right? You just want to distract yourself. And with that said, of course, number one, if you are the better you're prepared, of course, the easier it will be for you to get out of that strain of thought. Now, that's not saying you could be prepared so well, better than anyone, and still get super nervous and still lose it. That is just the human nature. That's the nature of performance. But that's why we love it, because right, that's why it's so addicting, because it gives you that little high like, because the stakes are high, right? When you're performing, it's not the same as when you're in the practice room. And that's why it's so much fun. I'm pretty much a performer, and I love performance experience when it goes well. And of course I hate it when I freak out too much and I have that voice going in my head. So for me, like I said, try to think, make it a game, and I promise you'll probably find something that will work for you at least a few times. And then once it starts kind of dwindling down because your brain catches on and it's, oh, I know what you're doing. You're trying to trick me, but I know I'm not going to go for it. Then you pretend something else and you make another game. And do that also while you practice performance mindset. That's actually the best thing you could do is to, and that's why I love recording myself, because I feel that recording puts an extra stress on me, even if I'm never going to post it anywhere, if I'm just doing it for myself. But I feel like this is a really great way. And then as I'm recording, I'm trying to practice my centering, right? Thinking of trying out these tricks that would quiet that voice, critical voice down in my head, and help me just to be in the moment and just do what's best, note by note, what's best for my performance, right? So yeah, so definitely use the recording to see if that trick is working for you, and then listen back. And if it's working, you'd be amazed at how well you'll do. So let's see, how about, so for the left hand, again, the little warm-ups, let's go back to that line 5 that Matt brought. That, thank you so much. It's my favorite part. So you could do this if you technically, if it's just a musical, you are so welcome. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'm having just so much fun. We're almost done. You know, I'm planning to stop at 2:00. So if you have any last minute questions, let me know. But going back to that beautiful section that Matt pointed out, if you still have not just musical, you know, challenges here, but technical too, again, use that same thing of make it into a warm up like this. So instead of practicing, right? So we can do, see what I did? I just basically played all of those double stops, but I repeated them several times, and I played them one note at a time. So it'll be easier for me to just listen for my intonation and correct whatever. Now, when you're comfortable doing that, why not add vibrato? Now, I know that there's that little part. You can voice it different. You could go. Yeah, just choose whatever works for you. You will know. But the idea is, so you go that way. Then, if you're comfortable doing this little warm up with vibrato, take the vibrato away and then do it as a double stop, but still. So basically, you don't have to repeat as many times as it's there. You just go through the combination of the double stops that you have, so you can just more effectively work on that. Then if you can do that, then add vibrato. Or whatever. So and once you can do that, try to play it as it is, but without doing this thing with the bow, just holding the bottom voice. See, it's a little easier. And see if you can vibrate. Right? So if you can vibrate and do that, then the last thing you do, you separate the voices as they are. Right? And hopefully that will work. And you can do that for any excerpt here. So, okay, I have another one. When playing the kreutzer up to tempo, How do you maintain a clean sound with all the string crossings, trills, grace notes? For example, fifth and sixth. Okay, lines. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we got a question for Kreutzer real quick, and that's a great question. I think, okay, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 5. Oh. That's what we're talking about, right? So lines 4, 5. Great question. So I think I've mentioned that. And of course, this is a very personal thing because it's up to you how far you want to push. You can totally ignore it too. So as from the very beginning, when I look at this etude, when I see the slurs, I do perceive them as phrasing slurs. So because I feel that, so there are all of those double slurs you can play, right? About this section short, right? Technically, you could play them like this and you could connect them completely. I feel that musically speaking, immediately for me, I want to phrase those where I let go of the last note a little bit. And I personally think it makes it sound more virtuosic, and to me it just sounds more like, I think maybe that's what he meant, because why else would he slur by 2? What would be another reason to slur these notes, right? So, but it's more than just a musical choice. This is where this phrasing actually works for you, and that's how you can, when you are able to relax just a little bit of a sound on the second note of the slur and taper your slur, it creates a little bit more time for your left hand, you see, to change from this to the next first note of the next slur. And that's your saving grace there. So basically, if you connect the notes, then your left hand has a very small amount of time to play, to get ready for the next note, the next trill, or whatever, because the bow is still making sound on the old note. So imagine how quick is that when you go from here without any stop. It's a very minute, right, amount of time where that your left hand should still hold the last note. And so it has a very little time to get ready for the next one, or not even time to get ready, it just has to play. So you see what I'm saying? So that's the hardest part in any fast tempo. It's the amount of time between the end of one note and the beginning of the next one. So when you use the phrasing appropriately, now again, you don't want to go overboard, right? Because it is all state, and I don't want people to tell you that you're playing wrong rhythms and so forth. You still want it to make an impression of evenness, right? But with the phrasing, that's your saving grace. This is by adding that little cushion of time wherever possible with the articulation, you're freeing your left hand, right? Because you have a little bit more time between the end of the previous note and the beginning of the next note. Second, you also allowing your bow arm to have a little bit more time for string crossings. And that's, for me, that is the biggest secret, which is no secret. If you're already doing it, then I think you're doing everything right. It's just, if you're already doing that and you're like utilizing those little tiny breaths that you can insert within the phrasing of this etude, then I think just watch another thing. The next thing, especially here, so string crossings, and you want to know exactly if it's up or down when you go to the new string. That's very important because those things change here. And then you want to know which one you start on the string and which one is up. So for example, in this part, if I'm playing an up bow on the new string, I try to start it on the string. So I won't go. If I do it like this, it becomes extremely unstable and my bow is out of control. But if I do, see, up bows. Down bows is a different story. So down bows, most of the time you're going to start off the air. But the up bows is where it's very convenient to still have them on the string, when you go to the new string, when you have string crossings. And so I would say this is the most important thing. Again, try to see if you're doing enough of the phrasing between. Because you see, I'm playing the wrong notes. Right? So all those little tiny spaces that I'm not changing the rhythm, I'm just tapering the slur to the degrees that gives me just a little bit of space before I start the next one. So definitely experiment with those timings, and then see if you know where your string crossings are, and if you're landing on the new string up or down bow, and also when you should start on the new string, and when you should allow it to jump. Most of the time at the top, when you're going up bow, I feel the most control I have is if I start my up bows on the string, and they will still come off, right? Because it's a natural way. Yeah, and then you can let it just fall down on the down bow. So this was so great. Thank you guys. It was super, super fun. You are so welcome. I want to thank you again for showing up. It was so much fun. I want to wish everyone good luck for your auditions. So remember that you worked hard, all of you. I was so impressed, how many of you were using the videos and practicing with them. And I'm so happy that I am able to be a part of this process. It's very exciting. For me, the most exciting thing is that you guys don't realize how much better of the violinist you become by working on this. And so I want you to remember and put the value on that. Don't put too much value on whether you ace the audition, whether you make it or not, which of course that's a wonderful thing. That's a cherry on top, but you already have the cake. So don't forget to celebrate the cake, okay? The frosting is a very small thing to add, right? And one more word of advice. I know it's very tempting because we try to be effective in the practice. So we always go straight to the problem. And I agree with that. But on my own experience and from teaching so many very talented violinists, what I've noticed and it's very strange, your mind, if you already mastered a certain technique, your mind doesn't recognize this unless you actually specifically acknowledge it to yourself. And so what happens, you might still be working on your intonation when your intonation is great, but because you don't acknowledge the fact that it's already good, you can't cope with that. You can't believe it. So you can't shift your attention to other things that are also important, right? And so you keep staying here. So what is important? It is important to really be objective about your performance from both sides, not only from the sides that still needs work, and it always will. You will never be where you say, oh, I'm perfect and I don't have to practice. That will never happen. Things will get easier though. They will, and that's the fun part. You will realize that it will take you much less time to prepare much harder work, which is great. That's what we work for. So just remember, but if you really want to see your progress to double, I promise you, if you record yourself and then just do a good recording where you like how you sound and listen to it, and then acknowledge the fact and tell yourself, oh my gosh, look, my intonation is really good, on target. My sound is on target. Look at all the things I'm doing already that I thought I wasn't, right? So I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because that's what holds me back the most and there will always be lag. There will always be lag, but you can make this, the smaller the lag, the sooner you can acknowledge that, yes, you already are here, not here still, just a little bit. Then the sooner you can start working from this space, right? And that means you could be more productive. You could be expanding your horizons. So apart from just working in intonation, or you could do things like we were doing today, like working on phrasing and so forth. So, right, I know it's a cliche, but really positive is very important. You try to be balanced in both ways and do practice performance mindset. So the last thing, I do have links I will post for, you know, private lessons. And also you can totally, if you would like to send me, I added something special before. You can send me a recording. It says a video, but you could, it's more productive if you send a video, but you can also just do, if you would rather do just an audio recording of under 10 minutes, and I will actually send you a feedback. Now, no one else will see that or hear it. It's just for me. But I know sometimes it's difficult to afford the lessons. So this is a much more affordable option, and it's kind of, you could totally run your record both of your excerpts and send it to me, and then I can give you feedback and personalize it to you according to what I hear, and especially if I can see it, then I think that could give you a boost of confidence, and also it will be kind of like a mock audition for your region and for your All State, in case if you know you don't have time for a private lesson or something like that. Let me know. I would love to help you out this way, and let me know what other things you would like to see on this channel. Now that once the All Regional State is over, I'll be sending out some polls to see what it is that you guys would like to see here. All right. So, okay. So how do you improve finger mobility and flexibility? So the last thing, that's all about, and actually this is great. That's probably what I will post. There's a book of my favorite warm-ups, and I'll actually put it in the comments here. So, and you might know it. So this guy, let's see if I'm even doing it right. There. Friday, so let me change that. Yes. Okay, so here is Matt. So this is one of my favorite resources when it comes to velocity in your left hand. Book of Violin Techniques 1. It's a fabulous book of exercises for your left hand that can improve both intonation and velocity. And they are available on IMSLP, so definitely check them out. And actually, you gave me a great idea. I think the next, if I'm going to do once, you know, probably this week, everyone's going to be busy, region auditions. But once the All State is over, I think this is what I'm going to start posting in my channel, these fabulous exercises and warm-ups, and hopefully advice on how to use them to improve the mobility. But the most important thing, just make sure that to warm up, right? And take breaks. Also, when you're taking breaks, I tell my students, make sure that your arms are hanging, because this, you see, impedes the circulation, doesn't go so well into your hands. So take breaks. See if you feel like you're getting tense, even if it's 10 to 15 minutes, just take literally 30 to 60-second break, but make sure that your arms are down and your fingers are relaxed. You will notice a big difference. Don't practice like hours without breaks. Don't do that. Take breaks and make sure that you're not just grasping your violin and bow while you're taking a break, right? Put the violin like here, down, and relax, and it will be great. Thank you so much. Guys, you have more questions? After we're wrapping up, feel free to post it under here. Absolutely, my pleasure. And I will come back and answer it. And also, I would love recommendations. We have a community tab, you know, or under any of my videos, if you have any recommendations for what you would like to see on this channel after the All State, all region season is over, I would absolutely love to know this. Okay, good luck, everyone. I am rooting for you. I'm your biggest fan, so you know. Bye.